Hello, BookTube. Friday reads for you on this dark and dreary Friday. Pouring rain, dark skies, with no let-up so far, and it's blustery enough so that you go outside for 2 seconds and you're soaked, even underneath your eyeglasses. So the puppy and I have not been going out very often. Usually, in the course of a day, when I have a young, healthy dog, and of course for the last 2 years I didn't. For the last 2 years I had 2 old, weak, sick dogs who were getting weaker and slower virtually every day. So I lost the habit. But usually when I have a young, healthy dog, I punctuate my day's work with them. I use them as a punctuation mark, and I expect them to use me as a punctuation mark. So I will write a review and then close up shop and clear my mind and put a harness on the dog and go out and cover some ground. Wonderful habit. I strongly urge all the rest of you to do it. And then you come back, launch yourself into the next thing you have to write or the next thing you have to read, and then repeat. And I can't do that on a day like today when all of Boston is under the grip of a nor'easter. So I thought I would do a Friday Reads for you. I will be reading more than these books, but I thought I'd give you at least the spine of my Friday Reads. And I wanted to show you pictures, but neither the iPad nor the yoga book is behaving itself, so it's just going to be me. And we'll start off with some fiction. First one being Steve Barry, who has a new novel called The Bishop's Pawn, which is actually out in finished copy now. I have a finished copy, and I still haven't read it. It's his character, Cotton Malone, and it takes place in 1990, I think, or 1989, before the internet is the crucial moment, when he's a Justice Department agent, and a series of events get him into investigating the assassination of Martin Luther King. And I know what it will be. I know that he will flush out a secret clandestine group or operative. I know that he will get to the bottom of the Martin Luther King assassination. It's fiction, of course. The author's perfectly free to indulge in wish fulfillment or fantasy. And I'm right there along, because Steve Barry's he's not a smart writer, but he's a very effective one. And I kind of like this when an author, of an ongoing series of He-Man action heroes, the types that take 2 rounds in the shoulder and keep fighting, or that don't experience critical blood loss, or who suture their own wounds in 2-bit hotels or whatever. But his character is like that, and usually when the author of a series like this embroils their character in a historical crime, the results are fascinating. You get really what the author thinks about that crime. They know perfectly well the uphill battle they would have selling a nonfiction work on their reconstruction of the crime, so they don't bother. Instead, they put it in a novel. We saw it years ago with Stephen Hunter, his Bob Lee Swagger series. There was a book called The Third Bullet. I actually reviewed it, I think, for the Christian Science Monitor, or maybe for the Washington Post, that revisits the JFK assassination. And even though the revisitation was silly, I still enjoyed it. I enjoyed the heck out of it. And I'm sure that I will enjoy The Bishop's Pawn for the same reason. And even though I myself would much prefer to read a straight-up history, especially by somebody who understands how to do straight-up history, which a novelist is not. It's not incumbent on them to know how to research something in a way that doesn't favor their own biases. But anyway, the point of it, the point of this whole Friday Reads list, is that book is going to take me about 90 minutes to read. And that means I can spare the time. For a book that I know is only going to be average, I can spare the time. The same thing applies to a few of the things on this list. I will hit that point later on as well. The next book is Paul Doherty. It's Devil's Wolf, which is, he has a murder mystery series starring Hugh Corbett. It takes place in the reign of, Hugh Corbett is another action-adventure hero. He's an enigmatic and omnicompetent main guy who lives and works as a kind of right-hand agent for King Edward I. And in this novel, King Edward II, this novel takes place in 1311. But it has deep roots in the Scottish wars of King Edward I. And it's, I don't even remember, it's the 15th or 16th novel in this series. The Hugh Corbett books never disappoint. They are the murder mystery equivalent of Bernard Cornwell. They don't ever disappoint. The research is rock solid. The dialogue is perfectly serviceable. This is another book that is going to take 90 minutes to read. Well, the reason I mentioned my dog walking routine is because I would usually do this. I would read a book, close it, take a deep breath, take the dog or dogs in the past outside, go for a nice long walk, and come back. The walk would be spent talking with the dog, looking at the scenery, but also thinking about what I just read, and then come back and either, if I'm on deadline, write a review, maybe of the thing I just read, or read another book. And this is another one. The Devil's Wolf is going to take 90 minutes to read. So this is 2 whole novels that we're talking about in less than 4 hours. So it's not like this is extravagant by any means. And then the third book, those Friday Reads, also a March Mystery Madness inspired title. These first 3 are relative murder mysteries. The second two, number 2 and number 3, definitely are murder mysteries, and that's inspired by March Mystery Madness, which has me really thinking about murder mysteries. I'm sort of giving them a little thumb on the scale when I make up my reading list, and that is, now that I think about it, for those of you who might not know, might have come to this video out of nowhere, that's a big BookTube event that's being hosted all throughout March by a bunch of great channels, including some people that I've watched forever and some people that I didn't even know. And Elizabeth at Lizzie Faye Books invited me to be one of the hosts. So I am helping to host this event, and it's making me think about murder mysteries. So this third one is a murder mystery. It's by Andrew Wilson, and it's called A Different Kind of Evil. And it's the follow-up to a book of his that I think he wrote last year called Talent for Evil, in which the sleuth is Agatha Christie herself. And I thought A Talent for Evil was only passable. And the idea of Agatha Christie, the queen of crime, one of the architects of the modern mystery genre, as a sleuth, becomes more ridiculous the more you know about Agatha Christie as a person. And I just finished reading, annotating, and reviewing a major new biography of her that comes out next month. So I feel like I know a lot about her, and the idea is absurd, absolutely absurd. But again, you can allow it. You can allow a fiction writer absurdity if they want, provided they're convincing about it. A Taste for Evil was not entirely convincing, and this new book, A Different Kind of Evil, it's just another murder adventure in which Agatha Christie witnesses and then cogitates on a crime. This one has an exotic setting. I think it takes place in the Canary Islands. But I'm kind of hoping that it will address some of the absurdities of the first book and maybe correct them. There is, theoretically, kind of, sort of, a way that you could make Agatha Christie the protagonist in a murder mystery series, but one of the key things you would have to do is give her a really strong counterpart, fictional counterpart, who does a lot of the things you associate with a sleuth in a crime series, because there's no way that Agatha Christie herself would have done most of those things. And maybe this book will do that. That existed in embryo in the first book. If the author has realized that and pulls a certain secondary character forward a little, then it could work a little better. We shall see. And then the next 2 books, again, A Different Kind of Evil is going to take me 90 minutes, if that. So keep that in mind. If this TBR for Friday Reads looks ridiculously ambitious, keep that in mind. Is that we're talking, the first 3 books we're talking about aren't even a whole afternoon. In other words, if I can't do it, but if I could ignore deadlines today, right now, I could have all of these done by Friday night. By the time I start my Friday night reading, if I turned over the afternoon time that I'm going to devote to reading, then I would have all of these done before my reading starts at midnight. So this isn't as crazy ambitious as it might sound from readers who have actual lives and have things to do with their time. But the next 2 books are, there's a term on BookTube called hate reading, where you read something knowing that you're going to hate it, and that gives you your motivation to keep the pages turning. And it gets a lot of scorn on BookTube as a wasteful way to read a book. And I guess I agree with that if the assumption of hate reading is that nothing the book can do will change your mind. I don't ever read that way, I hope. Any book can change my mind about it. So I often do go into a book expecting to be royally annoyed by it. I often do. If the author has created that impression in me in the course of a book or two or three or a lifetime, well, then I think it's only fair that I have that reaction. You know, if someone on the street slaps you every time you see them, you'd be crazy not to flinch when you see them. So, but it doesn't mean you don't hope for the best. And the next two books are books I'm not going to say that I'm going to hate read them. Sorry, I'm looking at my MacBook here because I don't have a tablet to look at. I'm not saying that I'm going to hate read these next two books, but I am going to them with an enormous amount of skepticism. And the first one is simply called Reporter. It's a memoir by the writer Seymour Hersh, and I have never found reporter memoirs to be good. Never. It's an old newspaper crony of mine eons ago used to make it as his formal rule, and most city room editors at the time and long before and long after, although maybe not now, maybe not in the 21st century. 21st century is the confessional century, for good or ill. Mostly ill. But back then, eons ago, this city editor used to say, remember, you're not part of the story. And that's a simple thing. It was an obvious dictum at the time. I think it's largely gone now. I think with the proliferation of online sites, autobiography has become a commonplace method for telling stories. I don't agree with it at all, but there's no avoiding it. And there's no avoiding also the fact that some really good writing has come out of that approach. But one way or another, when an old school reporter writes a memoir about what it was like for him or her to be an old school reporter, the results are almost always tedious. They almost always feel like you're trapped in somebody's living room while they have too many gins and talk about well-thumbed war stories, which I expect Reporter by Seymour Hersh to be. Now, this is a perfect example. I am expecting that. I will go in waiting for that to happen. I won't be surprised if it does, but I would love to be surprised. Seymour Hersh has written some books that I've really liked. I would love it if he surprised me. And if it's true for Seymour Hersh, then oh my God, how much more true is it for the next book on this Friday Reads, which I'll be reading tonight, Adjustment Day by Chuck Palahniuk, the author of Fight Club, and a whole bunch of garbage. The author of Fight Club, and a mountain of garbage. Chuck Palahniuk is one of the people that I have in mind, one of the current working literary people I have in mind when I repeat my own dictum, which is that I believe that everybody has one truly original and interesting book inside them. I advocate that everyone take advantage of, I believe that's a fact, and I advocate that everyone try to take advantage of the proliferation of writing, editing, and publishing tools that exist in the 21st century. You can publish your own story for no cost easily now. That has never been true before. And you can certainly write it. If you have a phone, a tablet, or a laptop, you can write your story in a means that is not burnable and that you can transmit and send. And I firmly believe that everybody should do that. However, the flip side of that contention for me has always been that most people only have one book inside them. Only one. I believe the idea, the commonplace idea promulgated by publishing houses, that we should keep going back to the same person year after year after year for a whole lifetime of telling stories. I have very seldom seen that idea reflected in reality. And very much including, for instance, someone we mentioned already, even on this Friday Reads, Agatha Christie. Her fans don't like to admit it, but most of her books are duds. Most of her books clearly show a nose to the grindstone, which might be how you write a book, but it's not supposed to be how a book reads. And I believe that Fight Club was Chuck Palahniuk's only book. I believe it was his only novel. But of course, when lightning strikes something like that, the publisher, and maybe even the writer, is going to think, no, I have a voice in italics with a capital V. I have an important voice for my time, for my generation, for my insights into the human condition or whatever. 9 out of 10 times that's not true, and nothing that Chuck Palahniuk has written other than Fight Club is any good. So I look at a book like Adjustment Day, it's long, it's probably ambitious. Usually, in the case of an author who's smart enough to know that none of their books has equaled the lightning of the one book, whether it's their first one or the second one or whatever, most of the writers who are smart enough to know that, inevitably, when they reach a certain age, want to contest it. None of them ever go quietly into that good night. Instead, they want to contest it. They reach a point and they think, I need to write a huge, ambitious novel. I need to prove that that wasn't a fluke and that I am the real thing. I'm dreading that this is Palahniuk doing that, that Adjustment Day is him doing that. I'm dreading that, because they are embarrassingly painful to read. I could link you a list of the books by authors who reach that point. I can practically read their minds when they do it. And I am, again, not hate reading, but I am expecting that this book will be that way. I will give it and the Seymour Hersh more time and more attention. I will read it slower, with more care, than the first 3 books that I mentioned, the murder mysteries. But I am expecting to like it less than anything. And then the last book isn't exactly a Friday Reads in the sense of reading it from page 1 to the end, although I may end up doing that. I think we saw it on this channel. It's the new Oxford Companion to the Brontes. It's, I think, the 3rd edition of a venerable Oxford Companion. And it's 3rd edition, so most of the stuff that's in it will be familiar to me. I will have already read it in the 1st and 2nd editions. But there'll be new stuff. And a lot of the old stuff I'll want to reread. Again, you look at this thing, the Oxford Companion to the Brontes, and you think, okay, well, first, you wouldn't read it as a book. You wouldn't read it from the first page to the last page sequentially. But I might do that. And second, it's so intimidating. It's so abstruse that it will certainly slow you down. I'm sure that friends of mine seeing this on my Friday TBR would say, well, that would be my whole weekend and more. But that's not actually true. I've read most of this book already, and if that forward momentum doesn't carry me, then I will start to cherry pick, and I will certainly read all the stuff that's new. I might just read that, or I might read that first and then sort of in concentric circles lapping out, read some of the other stuff that interests me, or maybe end up reading every word. But one way or another, it's a Friday Reads because it's going to take time and energy. But it isn't necessarily going to take a lot of time. So it goes on the list. And I just want to stop Friday Reads at those 6 books, although as I'm trying to make clear here, and I'm not trying to toot my own horn or to lord it over anybody, but I am trying to make clear that although this is a large-looking list, it does not represent a large amount of time. The Chuck Palahniuk and the Seymour Hersh I can read tonight. The murder mysteries I could read before tonight, if I wanted. If I did that, that would mean dawn on Saturday, my plate was entirely clear. So even if I take my time this weekend, do a lot of writing, apparently the pouring rain is going to stop tonight, so it'll be colder and blustery during the actual weekend, Saturday and Sunday, but it will still be perfect for dog walking. So even if I take my time and laid it out with lots of interruptions, I will still be reading more than just these books. But I wanted to mention them, just because they're on my immediate horizon and everybody's doing Friday Reads, and I don't want to be left out. But anyway, I'm going to wrap this up for now and see if I can maybe convince my little Fraulein to go out in the rain. Maybe, I don't know. She knows perfectly well that if she doesn't, that if she goes in the house, I'm not going to mind. She knows that perfectly well. And so, given her situation, where I absolutely hated doing thing A, and I knew that the person I was living with didn't mind if I did thing B instead, I'd probably do thing B, and I don't imagine she's much different. So we'll see. I'll try to get her to go outside. But anyway, I'll be back, and I'll see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.